The destructive effects of Hurricane Frederick will be evident in Mobile for many months. It's hard to ignore the smashed trees and broken power lines that strew the streets and yards. But there's also a positive effect the hurricane has had on residents. Alabama Power Company officials say the whole city has opened up in a spirit of cooperation. At one time, 500 power company workers were eating and sleeping in the municipal auditorium. In the areas where they were restoring power, residents held cookouts so the workers could eat something other than boxed lunches. Jim Scarborough says the patience and cooperation of residents have helped make the 12-hour days bearable.
We've been working around the clock. The morale of the people has been just tremendous throughout, so I don't really think that there's been a change in that. I think it's brought the community closer together, and we're sort of one right now, and everybody's dedicated to rebuilding Mobile. My wife and children were initiated in the use of hurricane lamps and Coleman stoves in your house, and gas barbecue grills outside and this sort of thing, and I think the neighbors have all pitched in. We've had cookouts every night to use the food up before it's spoiled and everything, and I really think it's been a good experience for everybody to go back to those sort of pioneer ways, and you've gotten to know your neighbors a lot better and become a lot closer.
You think that'll be a lasting kind of feeling?
Oh yeah, I think so. I think it'll go on. I think especially the relationship with neighbors and even people in the neighborhood that you maybe had never even met. A lot of folks have made new friends in their neighborhood.
The cleanup process in Mobile will take years, but if the friendships made over the past 3 weeks last, they could make those years just a little shorter. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News, Mobile.
Most of the kids are out here today, why they got them out here. It brought to me that to make the children more interested in the church and make the area more cleaner. To get the area cleaned up, we thought it would be best to get the children to do it in a place of grown people to get it up. And that's make what it really is, improve the area. And why we got it, improve this district out in here.
Things are fine, quite under control. We've treated approximately 51 students, faculty members, and staff. All these that we've been able to classify have been given some type of treatment, from booster to the complete beginning to complete treatment.
Okay.
So we're right on target.
Less than a year after the executive director of the Central Alabama Opportunities Industrialization Center suggested allowing welfare recipients to become self-sufficient, the idea has become reality. Several hundred residents turned out for the first Lowndes County Jubilee, celebrating months of hard work. There were booths, exhibits, live entertainment, food, and plenty of smiles. All of the residents praised the program and said today was testimony that it can work. The idea proposed by OIC Executive Director Connie Harper was to allow recipients to work and/or farm at home, then bring their products to market, providing them with money and less government support. Harper says welfare destroys people, and it's time recipients help themselves. She hopes to hold weekly farmers market type days so residents can continue earning money for themselves. Harper says that judging by today's response to the first annual Jubilee, the idea can work not only in South Central Alabama, but across the rest of the nation and the world. From Hayneville, Alabama, Paul Roth, WSFA TV News.
Miss Ruby, you are in some treatment now, but you've been known as a person who enjoyed being in her cup, so to speak. And you're now in treatment for alcoholism. Can you give us any idea as to why you decided or who helped you?
Well, Cornelia helped me decide. I think she can tell that better than I can. But let me say that I made up my mind that I had to stop drinking. And she was completely through with me. And I was losing a lot of friends. I had become not the type of alcoholic that I'd always been. Maybe I was an alcoholic longer than I thought, but I called myself a social drinker. And for the fun of it, and it just got the best of me. You know, things sometimes like that will catch up with you, and it completely caught up with me. And I knew it was a time for me to make a change. It was either that or 6 feet under. And I have such a good time, I want to keep having a good time. And before I ever took a drink, I had just as good time as I did when I took a drink.
How long did your drinking career last?
But after it became, well, I was an old woman before I started. But after it became such a habit that I had to have it in the daytime too, and that's been for some time now. Well, my drinking got progressively worse after Dr. Austin died. You know, and that happens with so many with us.
Is there any one specific point that your daughter, Cornelia, decided, or you decided that this was it?
Yeah, there was. Yes.
Can you talk about it?
Yeah, let her tell you. I think it'd be better for her to tell you. She can tell it better than I can.
I had gone to Pensacola Beach to get away from that environment so I could write, and I still didn't get away because it distracted me even while I was there. But while I was working on the book is when I met Dr. Catanzara, and he said he was in alcoholic treatment, and I asked him, you know, what his treatment was like, and when he told me that it was a family concept, I decided that it was a treatment that I felt would work for my mother. I knew that I had been involved with her in her alcoholism and in her drinking problems over the years, and that I had been affected by it. In fact, that I had had some depression recently because I was not able to write around the drinking, and it distracted me, and with the other problems that I'd had, that no matter whatever else I had to do in life, that this was one problem that never went away.
I am very much convinced that had Cornelia not joined her mother as a co-patient, Cornelia and Ruby would not have gotten this wellness process developed again.
How many persons are we talking about who have not met you, who are hidden in their homes, who have this problem? Could you give us an estimate?
The best estimate is that there are 10 to 12 million alcoholics in this country, all of whom affect at least 3 or 4 other people, their spouse, their children. So we're talking about some maybe 40 million persons affected by alcoholism who really need help. And this is one of the beautiful things that Ruby and Cornelia are doing, is to bring alcoholism again out of the closet and into the public awareness that help is available, and getting well is a very beautiful thing.
Dr. Catanzaro, could you give us some indication as to what your treatment involves? Is this a new process, or?
Yeah, the Friary program has been in operation for about 2 years, and the basic concept is that alcoholism is a family disease, and that's why Cornelia got involved. The whole family gets sick together, and in treatment they get well together. So we wanted to develop a very beautiful special setting, and we came across a facility that was a retreat for Franciscan friars formerly, and we kept the name the Friary. The basic process is the whole family working together to develop a new lifestyle for the alcoholic.
Where is this located?
And for the family. It's located in Pensacola. The Friary is located in Pensacola. Its sister organization, the Palm Beach Institute, which developed the idea of familization therapy, is located in West Palm Beach, Florida.
What is the key to success in your program?
I believe the key to success has been the involvement of the whole family. When Wilbur Mills came to be treated at the Palm Beach Institute some years ago, the crux, the change in his whole lifestyle occurred when his wife Polly joined him as a co-patient.
What kind of patient is Miss Ruby?
Delightful. Ruby and Cornelia have been just delightful people, very strong people, and I think in their getting well, they're going to be helping many, many other people to get well also.
Tell us just maybe a couple of, maybe just one page.
Well, the struggle, it will be based on historical facts.
At approximately 10:20 a.m. this morning, Mrs. Karen Sue Jones of 229 Happy Hollow Drive reported that her 4-year-old son, Jason, had been abducted. Units of the police department immediately went to that address and learned that the child had been taken by Mrs. Jones' ex-husband, his father, one James Lamar Jones. During the course of the so-called abduction, Donald E. Clayton, the brother of Ms. Jones, was assaulted by the suspect. At this time, we've issued an assault to murder warrant for James Lamar Jones, and as there is no permanent custody yet awarded in the divorce proceedings in which the Joneses are involved, we have not yet or will not issue a warrant for kidnapping for the child, as Alabama law prohibits us from doing this. We do have an assault to murder warrant for the suspect, and there's a statewide lookout for him at this time.
Father Walter's Child Care Center is home for 25 special children. All suffer mental and physical handicaps. However, now they can be taken out of their rooms to enjoy the outdoors almost like any other child. Thanks to a donation by a California woman, herself a victim of cerebral palsy, the center now has a new activities pavilion. Close to 50 persons helped to officially dedicate the Madeline Burdette Activities Pavilion. Center Medical Director Dr. Thomas Nolan praised the work of the 35 special people who staff the facility. Father Richard Patulski, who heads the Resurrection Center, which oversees the child care facility, quoted a biblical passage, "Help those who cannot help themselves." The ceremony concluded with the sprinkling of holy water and the spreading of incense, asking for God to look after all his children. Paul Roth, WSFA TV News.
The solar collectors on the roof of the Escambia County High School do more than just collect heat. They also provide an opportunity for students at the school to learn the latest in solar technology. The system is run by a computer in a room which doubles as a classroom. Architect John Chambliss says the school is the most important building designed in Alabama in 150 years.
The remarkable thing about this whole system is that we're teaching high school children with the Air Vocational Center to maintain and to troubleshoot the whole system, and that's really exciting.
The solar collectors are made of tubes, each of which contains water heated by the sun. That water is used to heat the building or cool it by using a lithium bromide chiller. The whole system cost about $300,000. The Department of Energy refused to fund the innovative project, so the money was provided by a trust fund set up by W.T. Neal, a Bruton resident. The system should pay for itself in about 20 years, or less if the cost of oil continues to rise. State School Superintendent Wayne Teague dedicated the building, commending the school board for sticking its neck out on the educational and energy-saving project. Chambliss thinks this building is one way for high school students to realize they're responsible to the generations that come after them. That's why he calls the Escambia County High School the Building of Hope. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News, Atmore.
Doctor, when you announced your decision a month ago, you said that you did so in the belief that it was in your best interest as well as the best interest of Auburn University. I wish you would expound upon that.
I've been here 14 years, speaking from a personal standpoint first, and that's a pretty good tenure for a university president today. One of my friends resigned at Colorado recently after 5 years, saying that was long enough to be president. And Bill McGill at Columbia said that he was resigning after 10 years because that was a lifetime in the presidency. But there are a number of pressures, and it is a time-consuming job. And after 14 years in the presidency and really 26 years in administration, I think it's time to take things a little easier. From the standpoint of Auburn, you need new blood, new creativity, I think, while there have been individuals that have served longer than I have in other institutions, you do tend to make your major contribution during your first few years, and then you have a sort of holding operation, I suppose, during the latter part of your tenure. I believe also, and this is probably the most important factor as far as Auburn is concerned, that there are some very difficult decisions to be made and some policies to be determined as we go into the decade of the 1980s. And they should be made by those who are going to be responsible for administering them, rather than being made by someone who's not going to be around to have to take that responsibility.
A great deal has been written in recent weeks in the aftermath of your announcement, referring back to an apparent disagreement some years ago when then head football coach Ralph Shug Jordan wanted to have the additional duties of athletic director, and you opposed this. And the stories, true or false, say that from that day forward, Harry Philpott was in trouble with Auburn athletic people. Would you?
I don't think that's true at all.
You did object to his having both positions.
From strictly an administrative point of view, Coach Jordan and I remain very good friends, and the situation afterwards, after the decision was made, was a very happy one as far as Auburn was concerned. We went to bowl games right on along, and we had one of our best seasons right after that. The decision was based altogether on the feeling that these were two big jobs, and after an examination of all other institutions around the country, there are very few institutions where both positions are held by one person.
Has football played any role, any part in your decision to
Not
retire?
in my decision to retire, no, none whatsoever. It's been an issue. Auburn people want to win, but on balance, I'd have to say that the record isn't all that bad. We've, in the last 2 years, finished in third place in the Southeastern Conference, and we've lost some disappointing games outside the conference and perhaps inside, but third out of the 10 schools that we're in competition with is not a bad record.
What advice would you give to the successor to you, whoever he might be?
I probably
have a winning football team?
I wouldn't give any advice. I'd let him come and ask me a question if he wanted to. But I don't have any advice for him.
If he came and says, Dr. Philpott, what's the best direction to go?
Well, it would be nice for Auburn to have a winning football team, but there isn't a great deal that the president can do about that.
You don't make many blocks.
No, and don't make many blocks or tackles, and I don't put in any plays.
Doctor, even though you will be soon departing as president of Auburn University when a successor is named, I'm advised that you and your lovely lady, Polly, will continue to be residents of this city. And
Our present plans are to stay here, and we're house hunting right now.
Great. Thank you so much, Doctor. To that office. Has that been a plus? Has he been a plus or a minus?
Well, he's been in only for 8 months at the present time, 10 months, I guess. The problems that he faced coming in with the trust fund that was out of balance, as it were, and had to be prorated, the pressures that came on from first of all, exploring the possibility of a 10% cut in appropriation and then level funding, as we finally came out with, coupled with 12% inflation, has made it a rather difficult situation. Now, I think the outcome of this will be found in terms of the study of higher education, the role of Auburn in that, the kinds of programs that are going to be emphasized here at Auburn, and that we'll see how that works.
With the disaster, and I'll just let him lead off and answer questions. I'll be glad to answer any that you've got that relate to this. Bill Simpson also.
It may interest you to know that we've had so far in this area 20,000 interviews, 15,000 applications have been handed out. We've had a very quick decline of about 4,500 of these applications, and this is important because those persons who are declined by us because of repayment ability become eligible for up to a $5,000 grant from the state. 75% of that is federal money and 25% is state money. This disaster is a little different than the one in Biloxi 10 years ago, in that there's a lot more insurance coverage here than there was there. Over there, most of the damage was rising water. Very little insurance was involved. Here, on the other hand, there's a lot of insurance, and to some extent, people who own homes, people who own businesses, want to ascertain how much they're going to get from their insurance company prior to going through and wanting us to approve their application.
When Mrs. Carter got off the plane, she said she was so close to Georgia she almost felt as though she were back home. During a news conference at the airport, she made another reference to the South being her home in response to a question about the importance of Alabama's early primary.
The South is very important to us, and the South is home, and I hope that we'll carry all the southern states.
Mrs. Carter says she's not concerned about Kennedy leading her husband in the polls. She says the president has tackled problems such as inflation and energy without worrying about political factors. After leaving the airport, Mrs. Carter attended a fundraising reception and dinner. Prominent Alabamians paid as much as $500 apiece to shake hands and eat dinner with the First Lady. The dinner was supposed to raise $100,000 for the Carter-Mondale campaign. But with Alabama's primary coming up in March, it was apparent Mrs. Carter was interested in drumming up votes as well as campaign contributions. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News, Birmingham.
I believe that we're going to continue with the same fervor and vigor to achieve the programs and the priorities that we have set. Anyone who is competent, anyone who is doing his job, anyone who is a professional employee certainly has nothing to fear from, had nothing to fear from Dr. Bronner, much less from myself. We are going to scrutinize all areas of government. There'll be no change in our approach. It's straight ahead with the goal in mind, and certainly that's what I'm going to do.
Papanastis says his main concern now is assuring the continued smooth operation of the finance office, and he says he has no intention of altering its approach or priorities. He says Governor James and his administration represents a commitment to the reformation of government.
Obviously, looking at the personnel situation, getting good people, streamlining it so you have efficient organizations, and essentially trying to find those areas of financial operation as well as administrative operation that can be improved upon and provide better service at less cost. And I think that's what government is supposed to do, and that's what we fully intend to do.
Papanastis says he would be derelict if he did not call upon the expertise of former finance director David Bronner from time to time. But Papanastis says he is the finance director and as such answers directly to Governor Fob James. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
The people of Escambia County have met the challenge of harnessing the sun. The challenge was not only the technological one of designing and installing an innovative system, but it became a financial challenge when the Department of Energy refused to fund the project. A Bruton resident set up a trust fund that provided the $300,000 for the solar system. The collectors on the roof are made of tubes filled with water. The sun heats the water, which in turn heats the building, or is used to make cold water to cool the building. The system has been in use since June with no major problems. It suffered no damage even when hit with 100-mile-an-hour winds from Hurricane Frederick.
The system, we turned it on and it started working. Now we have had problems. We've had a leak here and a leak there, but they've been attended to. And the remarkable thing about this whole system is that we're teaching high school children with the Air Vocational Center to maintain and to troubleshoot the whole system, and that's really exciting.
Chambliss says the school is the most important building designed in Alabama in 150 years. He says it will teach young people to be responsible to generations that come after them. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News, Atmore.
Ms. Gray says the government has participated in the abortion crisis following a January 22, 1973 U.S. Supreme Court ruling which said abortions are legal. Ms. Gray says the crisis is disguised with jargon like terminating a pregnancy. Ms. Gray says the only way to terminate a pregnancy is through live birth. The other alternative is killing a son or daughter. Ms. Gray says ending the crisis will involve waging a war against the passage of any constitutional amendment allowing abortion. Ms. Gray says the amendment that her group is lobbying for will not tolerate any form of abortion, even if the mother or child's life is at stake.
They have an equal right to live, and if any of them are in trouble, you do everything you can to save both the mother and her child. You don't kill children to save mothers, and you don't kill mothers to save children.
Ms. Gray says the U.S. Supreme Court could reverse its decision as long as no constitutional amendment allows abortion, but she says she doesn't think the court justices now sitting will step back and say they were wrong. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
To die with federal money.
At a brief news conference at the Birmingham airport, Mrs. Carter repeated the message she's given at other fundraisers, that her husband has been courageous in tackling problems facing his administration. About 150 persons paid $500 apiece to attend a dinner and reception with the First Lady. Included were Alabama House Speaker Joe McCorkadale and Lieutenant Governor George McMillan, who was Master of Ceremonies for the dinner. Mrs. Carter told the dinner guests that the country's energy problem is the result of what she called inaction and political timidity of past leaders. On the subject of military power, she said the U.S. is strong and her husband will keep it that way. Carter has faced criticism lately from politicians who think he hasn't taken a tough enough stance on the presence of Soviet combat troops in Cuba. The fundraising dinner brought in about $100,000 for the Carter-Mondale campaign. And with the Alabama presidential primary coming up in March, Carter supporters hope Mrs. Carter's visit also may have brought in some votes. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News, Birmingham. At a brief news conference at the Birmingham airport, Mrs. Carter told reporters her husband has had to face tough problems other leaders haven't dealt with.
Jimmy has tackled problems that have been with us for a long time, and problems that have not been tackled before, because it took somebody very courageous to stand up and do these things. Problems like energy, for instance, and inflation that are with us now, that have been with us for a long time, would not be nearly as bad if somebody in the past had had the political courage to tackle those problems. But he's faced the issues, all of them, without caring about political expediency.
After leaving the airport, Mrs. Carter attended a fundraising reception and dinner. Some guests paid as much as $500 apiece to meet the First Lady. The dinner brought in about $100,000 for the Carter-Mondale campaign. Mrs. Carter's visit to Alabama was especially important because Alabama has one of the earliest presidential primaries coming up in March. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News, Birmingham.
These things happen is somewhat like when we have a tragedy in our personal lives. We're in a state of shock. The good Lord gave us that buffer time, and we react. And after that period passes, then the hard reality of the mission ahead sets in to recover. And that is beginning to set in now on the Gulf Coast. So no need to look back. From here, it should be, and I think it is, the heart and minds of certainly the folks from our coastal area, but from upstate as well. We want to rebuild our Gulf Coast because it belongs to all of us. Bigger and better than ever, and do it in record time.
I don't know that it will, Phil. That's well put, I think. I don't think it'll help at all. It might help Vanderbilt get ready for us, but I know last week was an incentive for us playing a ranked team, and certainly there'll be no exception for Vanderbilt this week. However, I hope that it'll make our players realize that we can do some of those things. We can play well, and we can score some points. Now I hope that they'll also realize that we can stop some other folks too, and we need to do that. But Vanderbilt worries you because they're capable of scoring points and moving the football. And any time a team can do that, you better certainly take them serious.
You have to be very happy with the quarterback situation now. You've developed some depth.
Well, we've been trying to do that all along, and hopefully it wasn't just a flash in the pan. We've been very pleased with the play of our starter, Charlie Trotman. Suffered a minor injury, I think, Saturday. Hopefully he'll be ready. And then Charlie Thomas came on when he was thrown in there and performed well. And I hope he'll continue to improve. If he continues to improve, he could certainly be a big help to us along the line.
The teachers' board member who first argued the most against immediately rehiring Bronner was Dr. Paul Hubbard. Hubbard said he was worried that Bronner would still be running the finance director's office in violation of a Montgomery Circuit Court ruling, which said that Bronner could not be both secretary-treasurer to the retirement systems and state finance director.
He indicated to this board in no uncertain terms, as I read it and as I listened and questioned, that things were going to be pretty much as usual. Now, there'd be a change of some hats and there'd be a change of some titles, but a pretty basic principle in law, as I understand it, is that one cannot achieve indirectly that which the court says is directly against the law.
The agreement settles the mind of those board members who were afraid that Bronner would still be in control of state finance office affairs while holding the job of secretary-treasurer with the teachers' retirement systems. The motion to rehire Bronner was submitted by Hubbard, and the vote was unanimous. The motion says that after a year's leave, Bronner will return to the Teachers Board Secretary-Treasurer job. In the interim, Deputy Secretary William Walsh will perform Bronner's duties. The two board members most concerned with the issue, Hubbard and Annie Laurie Gunter, say they are satisfied with it. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News, reporting.
This is the state docks at the Port of Mobile. The Port of Mobile is the 9th busiest port in the United States. Almost $2 billion in cargo moved through here last year. The state docks has been in operation for 51 years, and its impact on Alabama's economy is impressive. Last year, foreign waterborne shipping through the port totaled 23,412,500 tons, an increase of over 31% from 1977. During fiscal 1978, the state dock set an all-time record for net earnings, over $5 million. But more important is this: around 130,000 jobs in Alabama, an annual payroll of more than $1 billion are in some way related to the seaport in Mobile. That's about 1 out of every 11 jobs in the state. But the progress of the state docks has been slowed by the devastation left behind by Hurricane Frederick. Damage estimates are running in excess of $20 million. This is what's left of 2 giant ship unloaders, each one weighing around 500 tons. They collapsed under the force of the hurricane winds. Before the storm, they looked like this. Robert M. Hope is director of the state docks. He says despite the setback from Hurricane Frederick, the future of the state docks is bright.
Very definitely, with the 10-tom, not too many years away from completion, I think our future is extremely bright, and my major concern is that we will be able to provide the facilities that will be necessary to handle the amount of cargo that will be offered.
To handle the expected growth, improvements are underway in virtually every area of the dock's operation, including more than $10 million in construction of wharves and warehouses. And later this month, state docks representatives will be attending the World Trade Convention in New York to attract even more business to Alabama's growing seaport. Michael Jones, WSFA TV News, Mobile.
Robert Hill was fired along with some 60 other employees in May when they decided to go on strike because of what they call discriminatory practices by the housing authority. Hill has been a maintenance worker for the authority for 2 years.
It's been some white that was hired there after me, and they was making more than that, and right now I know they're making more than I am.
The black maintenance workers have actually had to train some of these white supervisors that have been hired more recently than Mr. Hill has been working there. Of course, one of the allegations of our suit is that the Housing Authority entered into an annual contribution contract with HUD whereby prevailing wage rates and overtime compensation was to be paid to these workers. So far, they've not gotten any of this pay.
Beck says the Department of Housing and Urban Development has already charged the authority with paying less than the prevailing wage. If Beck wins the suit, he says the authority could end up paying $1 million in back wages and overtime. Housing Authority Executive Director J.C. Miller says he has no comment on the suit until he's seen it. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
On the night of September 26th, Robert Norton was ticketed by a Montgomery police officer for what the officer said was improper lane usage. Norton was in the far right lane of the Troy Highway, preparing to make a right turn onto Virginia Loop Road. The officer said Norton was required by law to make the turn at the John Patterson Trade School and could not continue in the right lane to Virginia Loop. Before going to court, Norton photographed the area, illustrating what he feels is a lack of adequate warning signs. Norton says he counted 45 cars making the turn as he did in a 15-minute period while photographing the area. But he was found guilty of the charge before Judge Mathis Peel. Norton says better markings and signs are needed.
I think proper marking would do it, and if we could possibly get some signs posted down that way telling you that you're supposed to turn right in here, I think that would do the trick.
This afternoon, we checked with the State of Alabama Manual on uniform traffic control devices for streets and highways. And according to the manual, legend and symbol marking shall not be used for mandatory messages except as supplements to standard signs. We cannot find any standard signs requiring a right-hand turn. And a spokesman for the State Highway Department's Maintenance Bureau says signs are not in place because it was determined that proceeding in the right-hand lane into the Virginia Loop Road intersection posed no traffic hazard. Buddy Hale, the city's attorney for traffic court, says the case is closed, but Mr. Norton can appeal. Mayor Emery Fulmer says the city will continue enforcing the traffic laws as they are written. Michael Jones, WSFA TV News.
Yeah, you're punched out.
The reason, the magic of Arnie Palmer. Palmer is expected to draw his Army in his first ever appearance in the Southern, and judging by the putts he was making today, he probably will be around for the final 2 rounds, as the tournament officials so fervently hope. Meanwhile, the Southern continues to be a haven for Alabama golfers. Jerry Pate has won the tournament the last 2 years. Hubie Green of Birmingham has won here. So has Mac McClendon. And now, young Buddy Gardner, who played his junior golf at Bonnycrest Country Club in Montgomery before starring at Auburn, is hoping to do well this week. He's virtually assured of making golf's top 60 money winners, but a high finish here could sew it up for him for sure and mean a lot to him in 1980.
3 seconds this year. That's not too bad, huh?
Well, pretty happy.
I guess. Now you're fighting for that top 60 list. What, if you make it, and every indication points towards you making it, what will that do for you next year?
Well, it just exempt me from qualifying from any tournament, and I can sort of choose where I want to play and courses that have been good to me and suit my game. So it'll help a lot. Whereas, you know, this past year I've just had to keep going, you know. I keep making cuts. You've got to keep playing. And
how much time did you take off? How many times did you leave the tour this year?
Only about 5 weeks, and it's
Ironman, huh?
Yeah, it's really gotten sort of old. I'm just
How do you know when you're getting tired in this game?
Well, you just start thinking sort of crazy, you know. You start hitting stupid shots, and I just can't think real well when I stay out here 6 or 7 or 8 weeks. At one point,
homesick?
Yeah, sure. Real homesick.
Feel like you're all alone, huh?
Yeah.
Gotta go home then.
Yeah. You know, I stayed out at one point 13 straight weeks. I made, I think, 10 cuts in a row, and that really, and it turned out I ended up messing up my back, and it kept me out for 2 or 3 weeks, and so maybe next year I'm just going to sort of plan a little better and not play as many in a row.
Do you
Health authorities say Alabama ranks 3rd in the nation in teenage pregnancies and 2nd in the infant mortality rate. Concern over these statistics has led to the establishment of a prenatal clinic at the Montgomery County Health Department. It had been determined that 1/3 of the patients attending the 3 weekly health department maternity clinics were in their teens.
The main objective of our clinic is to produce a healthy baby to a healthy mother. In particular, this means to prevent maternal morbidity and mortality, to prevent infant mortality, to prevent premature births and low birth weight infants.
We, as a staff here at the Montgomery County Health Department, felt that there was a great need for a teenage clinic here at the department. Some 1/3 of the pregnancies in Montgomery County are teenage pregnancies. We felt that this was a significant percentage that we should deal with in order to decrease infant mortality, fetal deaths, maternal morbidity or illnesses. There was a need for this type of clinic.
Teenagers are more at risk for medical complications during pregnancy, such as high blood pressure during pregnancy, anemia, and this sort of thing.
Also, the fact that so many teenagers, when they become pregnant, do not finish high school was another reason for our having this clinic, so that we might counsel them to continue their education after delivery of the baby.
The clinic meets the needs for pregnant teenagers that don't have private doctors. Next Saturday on Alabama Illustrated, we'll find out more about the clinic. This is Ivy Berman reporting from the County Department of Health.
About a year ago, Tommy Lee Hines was convicted of raping a white woman and sentenced to 30 years in prison.
The trial led to protest by blacks and counter-protest by the Ku Klux Klan. Hines' defenders say he's mentally retarded and his prosecution was racially motivated. Early this summer, there were charges that Hines himself was raped by another inmate at Kilby Prison. An investigation by Prison Commissioner Robert Britton turned up little. U.W. Clemon, an attorney for Hines, asked the governor to appoint a doctor to examine him. Under state law, if an inmate is found to be mentally ill, then the governor can have that prisoner transferred to a mental institution. Mike Waters, the governor's legal advisor, says there is the possibility that Hines can be transferred back to prison later if his mental illness is cured.
There is a question as to whether or not this statute could apply in the case of retardation. The advice I've received from some people is that yes, as a legal matter, retardation could be considered one form of mental illness, although it's my understanding that in medical circles, mental retardation is completely separate from mental illness.
Hines is expected to be moved within several weeks. In the meantime, state officials say they'll be looking for a mental facility that not only affords the best care, but also security. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
How good is the Alabama football team? At first glance, the Tide looks to be on the trail of another national championship. The team is a perfect 4-0. They have outscored opponents 179-9. The team ranks first in the nation in rushing, second in scoring, and third in total offense. But statistics can be misleading. Take a look at the Tide's opposition this year. Of the teams Alabama has played, only Baylor has a winning record. The combined win-loss record stands at 4-12-1. In short, the schedule has been weak. Playing teams of that caliber will keep you high in the polls, but does it test you sufficiently so you can improve each week?
Right, this team hasn't been tested together. You have to, every year you have to build a new football team, and this is a new football team. But we've done the things right in practice, and we've done the things right in the game, so I think that if we have to, that we can just suck it up and do what we have to do to win a football game.
Every weekend, I think that the team that we're playing, I think that they're very good. Myself, on film they look good, and I look at that away, and that helped me get up for the game.
Well, I think we should improve on everything. We shouldn't get those penalties and fumbles we had last week. That's where you start. And we got to have a better pass rush. We got to tackle better. And in the clutch, we've got to move people out of there, which we have failed to do on occasion this year.
Alabama is a good football team, but until it is tested on the field, we won't know just how good. This weekend will be a better barometer. Alabama travels to Gainesville to meet Florida. The Gators have been peaking for this game, and it's the first time Alabama will play before a really hostile crowd. Just how good is Alabama? This weekend's game will go a long way toward answering that question. Fred Albers, WSFA TV Sports.
Rather than affording me the courtesy that is commonly afforded other attorneys, of calling me and letting me know that the grand jury had handed down an indictment and to surrender my client or to turn him in. The district attorney's office, in conjunction with the Department of Youth Services, staged an arrest, which turned out, in my view, to have been a fanfare. They handcuffed my client. He rode all the way back to Montgomery handcuffed. I was with him at all times. I'm not at liberty to say why they did it that way, but I think it's reasonable to conclude that the way that it was conducted was the way they preferred to do it. And the problem that I have with it is the defendant's right to be presumed innocent.
There was some figures that was put in the wrong column. It was supposed to have been in my column, the mayor's column, or Miss Fauchier. But I understand it was 71 votes put in her column. It was supposed to go to the mayor. And the 12 votes to her, and I think 58 votes or something go to me. And that would put me 8 votes ahead of her.
Mr. Helms, now that you realize that there's been a mistake, officials have admitted there's been a mistabulation, what do you plan to do?
Whatever it takes, Norman, that's what I'm going to do.
When do you plan to take this action?
It's going to happen between now and Monday.
The former Texas governor is meeting with Republican leaders in central Alabama trying to get his campaign put together by Thanksgiving. He says he thinks Alabamians are worried about the same things that bother other Americans, especially inflation and high interest rates. He says the administration hasn't done a very good job of handling the country's financial problems.
What the mistake we're making, and the mistake they're making, I should say, is that they're squeezing the borrower in this country with tight money and high interest, and yet the administration doesn't have the courage to use fiscal restraint. We ought to be cutting back on our spending, trying to balance the budget, curbing this bureaucracy, and that's the exercise of fiscal policy. And it's just like a man that needs 2 crutches and trying to walk on one when you use just monetary policy of high interest and tight money. But they think they can get away with it because people tend to blame their local banker for high interest rates. They don't somehow translate that into criticism of a national administration.
Connolly also says President Carter hasn't been strict enough with the Soviets. He thinks the U.S. should increase defense spending by 6% and refuse to consider the SALT II treaty until the Soviets withdraw their combat troops from Cuba. Connolly will speak at a fundraising dinner tonight. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
All the big expense items, such as refrigerators.
I got off to a better start than I had last year, and I was probably around 40th on the money list when I got hurt. And then after that, I just been trying to regroup after I was off for 2 months. I missed June and July, and since then I've had a baby. And
it's a lot of good tournaments in June and July, right?
Yeah, well, with my last 2 years, it's been my best period, and I've had my best tournaments at that time. And since then, I've got a 7-week-old baby, and been trying to, just things have just been kind of adding up. But I can't blame it all on that. I don't blame it on anything, really. I just hadn't played well.
You feel like you're healthy now, and it's just a matter of getting it back?
Yeah, I think so. I need to get a few good tournaments under my belt and get some confidence back, mainly.
Connolly told the enthusiastic crowd that President Carter's administration hasn't been doing a good job of handling the country's financial problems or the energy crisis. He says it's time the citizens get angry and start putting pressure on their congressmen.
Why do I say you have to get the people aroused? Simply because the only way you're really going to do it is to get the cooperation of the Congress to cut it back. They're the ones that cause it. We can't kid ourselves about it. A president doesn't have that power. Congress creates, they're the ones that create the bureaucracy. And the power of appropriation is in the Congress. They're the ones that appropriate the money. I don't care what a president recommends. He can't spend a dollar Congress doesn't appropriate.
Connolly says the nation's inflation rate has gone from 4.8% to 14% since Carter took office. But he says Kennedy, not Carter, will be the man to beat in 1980. And last night's dinner raised $100,000 toward Connolly's campaign to do that. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News. Connolly told more than 600 guests that the inflation rate has risen from 4.8% to 14% since Carter took office. He says the key to cutting down inflation is to begin with government spending.
I would start all across the board. I would approach it from two different standpoints. I'd first try to find all this fraud and corruption that they say is in this government. The Inspector General of HEW says he can identify $6 to $7 billion a year in waste, fraud, and corruption. I'd start there in that department. Secondly, I would ask the Office of Management and Budget that goes over all of the budget requests from all the departments and agencies to say to every agency before they submit their budget, tell us why you can't get along with not filling 1/3 of the vacancies that will occur in your department next year.
Connolly says Alabama is a critical state in the 1980 campaign because it is in the Deep South and has one of the earliest primaries. He says he intends to carry Alabama. His $125 a plate dinner brought in $100,000. That's just a little more than fundraisers in Birmingham made earlier this week when Rosalind Carter went there to raise money for the Carter campaign. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
Principally a conspiracy eliminated from office, and that other counties are having problems also with the reappraisal.
Now the problem is going to come, or has come, because we're under these orders in other counties. You know, we talk about 10 people, we're down to. That's no problem. But what happens if the same thing? We're under similar orders in Houston County, Tuscaloosa, Mobile, Montgomery, Birmingham City, Jefferson County, Montgomery, of course. We're constantly trying to keep all of these down below their design capacity. Naturally, the rest of the counties, which were not under court order, are suffering from this. We're not able to get to them.
Are you, by any chance, taking inmates out of these counties and putting them into other counties not under the court order?
On occasion, that has happened when the sheriffs are willing to cooperate, and they are. They've tried their best to cooperate with us. They're overcrowded, too.
Number 21, Willie May, has been the spark plug of the Jeff Davis offense all year long. Tonight, he ignited the Volunteers with this 22-yard run in the first quarter. Point after made it 7-0. When May needed a rest, Curtis Stewart was there to fill in nicely. This 25-yard run made the score 14-0. Stewart added his second touchdown in the evening with a short 1-yard burst. 21-0, Jeff Davis in front. The Volunteers played near flawless football in the first half. Nearly everything they tried worked, including the passing game. Woody Trotman hauled in this 15-yard reception. A large portion of tonight's game has to go to the offensive line. Steve Stearns, Tim Ruddock, Todd Smithereen, John Hall, and Steve Williams dominated play throughout the evening. The Volunteers led at half 28-0, added 14 points in the second half. Jeff Davis defeats Tuscaloosa County of Northport 42-8. Fred Albers, WSFA TV Sports.
Calling it a march for justice, close to 200 people took to the streets of Roanoke, protesting what they say is social inequality in the eastern Alabama city. They had come from all over: LaGrange in Atlanta, Georgia, Talladega, Montgomery, Tuskegee, and Roanoke, Alabama. The group is protesting alleged incidents of police brutality and the appointment of a local man convicted of assaulting a black minister as the city's police chief. Protesters are also upset over the gubernatorial appointment of I.B. Moore as Randolph County Sheriff. Moore resigned as police chief of Roanoke several months after members of the black community charged several officers with police brutality. In one instance, a black youth was cut while officers tried to remove plastic handcuffs from his wrists with a knife. Finally, citizens charged city officials with violating the Sunshine Law and with various forms of discrimination. After marching from the Deliverance Temple Church through downtown to the City Hall, speaker after speaker urged the crowd to continue its efforts. Earlier this year, the group began a selective buying campaign in Roanoke, and city officials charged leaders did not want to sit down and discuss the grievances. Now, spokesman Ron Terry says the group is willing to sit down and try to work out the problems. Terry says they will try next week to meet with city and business leaders to discuss the issues. He says that if the meeting does not take place or it is not successful, Roanoke could see an increased selective buying campaign, or as one speaker said, a Black Christmas. Paul Roth, WSFA TV News, Roanoke. Calling it a march for justice, close to 200 people took to the streets of Roanoke, protesting what they say is social inequality in the eastern Alabama city. They had come from all over: LaGrange in Atlanta, Georgia, Talladega, Montgomery, Tuskegee, and Roanoke, Alabama. The group is protesting alleged incidents of police brutality and the appointment of a local man convicted of assaulting a black minister as the city's police chief. Mayor Tommy Hill pardoned Floyd Fettner of the crime so that he could accept the job as the city's police chief. Protesters are also upset over the gubernatorial appointment of I.B. Moore as Randolph County Sheriff. Moore resigned as police chief of Roanoke several months after members of the black community charged several officers with police brutality. In one instance, a black youth was cut while officers tried to remove plastic handcuffs from his wrists with a knife. Finally, citizens charged city officials with violating the Sunshine Law and with various forms of discrimination. After marching from the Deliverance Temple Church through downtown to the City Hall, speaker after speaker urged the crowd to continue its efforts. Earlier this year, the group began a selective buying campaign in Roanoke, and city